Well, hello, students. Today we're going to explore the important concept of manorialism and feudalism from medieval European history. Now, manorialism has two roots, one based in ancient Rome, the other in the German tribes. So imagine ancient Rome had these huge, vast and powerful empire, had these enormous agricultural estates known as latifundia. And these states relied on a huge number of slaves for agricultural production. And these latifundia produced goods for sale and for profit. So these are things like livestock, olive oil, grain, garum, a local fish sauce, even wine. And the latifundia quickly became economic powerhouses, achieving greater productivity, partially because the senatorial owners exempted themselves from land taxes. This allowed them to reinvest their profits, and so they did so by purchasing up smaller farms. However, this system was not without its challenges. As these small farmers were bought up by the wealthy, they created a landless peasantry that ended up moving to Rome and becoming dependent on state subsidies. And after the first and second centuries, due to a lack of new conquests, the supply of slaves began to dwindle. The other root of the manorial system are the Germanic tribes, who had a tradition of tribal-based clan ownership and governance. Now, these tribes migrated and settled in medieval Europe and brought with them the concept of local governance. This set the stage for the manorial system, where a lord, often a noble or a local chieftain, oversaw a territory called a manor. Now, these Germanic settlements were known for their self-sufficiency and isolation. Manors were self-contained and made everything they needed for daily life, like farmland, housing, and crops. Now, the structure of a manor would have had a fortified house or a large hut if it was a poorer manor, usually in the center of the territory, which was the lord's residence. And surrounding it would have been a village, home to most of the peasants and serfs. The village may have even boasted a church, the spiritual center where the community could come together, worship, and pray. Now, outside of the village, the manor had vast tracts of land. Some of it were arable fields for farming, others was pasture land for raising livestock, and there were even common areas where the village could graze their own personal livestock or do things like gathering firewood. The manor was remarkably self-sufficient. The crop fields and orchards are spread across the landscape, and a system of 3 fields was adopted where the manor could rotate crops in order to maintain the fertility of the soil. The majority of the people on the manor are serfs and peasants who toil the land. The serfs are going to be on the bottom of the scale. They are actually bound to the manor and can't leave it without the lord's permission. They do have certain rights, like they could own property, not land, but property like cows or chickens, or they would own the cheese if they produced cheese from the extra grain, or if the wife made beer from some of the extra grain that they may have grown. So they could own those types of things. And the peasants, on the other hand, are very, very similar, but they were not tied to the land in the same way. Now, the manor functions as an economic unit. It produces all of the goods for local consumption and trade, like I said. A portion of all of the produce would have been given to the lord as rent, and others may have been set aside for communal needs, like the upkeep of the manor. Now, the manor processed and prepared all of its own agricultural products. It would have had its own mill, they would have had probably their own bakery and other facilities. Some manors were privileged enough to hold markets and became local economic centers, or where goods and services and even news of the outside world would have been exchanged. The manor has a ruler, often a noble or a landowner known as the lord. And the lord holds various rights over the land. He has to hold court, he levies taxes, he has to protect his property and land, and may even grant land to vassals of his own. And in exchange for these, the lord has a set of obligations of protecting the peasants and maintaining order in the manor. The main way this order was maintained was through its own judicial system, where the lord, acting as judge and jury, presided over a manorial court. This court settled disputes, it enforced contracts, it would deal with criminal cases, civil manners, all ensuring a sense of justice within the manor. Now, as time went on, this system becomes incredibly hierarchical and stagnant. You're born into the class that you're going to die in. And the church then plays the crucial role of providing a spiritual guidance and reinforcing that order. Society essentially becomes like a feudal pyramid, and at the top were the kings, who granted land to nobles in exchange for loyalty and military support. These kings were considered God's representatives on earth. Just below the king are nobles, including dukes, earls, and barons, and they hold vast territories and manage local affairs. The vassals who swore loyalty to the Lord were granted land, and knights in turns are served as warriors protecting both of the vassals and the vassals' lords. Now, feudalism begins to decline in the 13th centuries, but actually won't completely decline or disappear from Europe, and actually until the end of World War II. But the decline is led to by factors like the growth of towns that would allow peasants to escape, increased trade. You will see a series of plagues that decimate the population, as well as the rise of stronger monarchies, all grasping for power and taking it from the local lords. So, manorialism is the economic engine of the Middle Ages and has its roots in the latifundia of the Roman Empire and the Germanic tradition of clan-based land ownership and governance. These manors are self-sufficient, with villages, farmland, and resources. Feudalism is that hierarchical system that grew out of manorialism, with the kings at the top, followed by their nobles, vassals, knights, and peasants. Mutual obligations are what held all of this together. So I hope this was a good primer and gave you a little sense of the way that how society was conducted and governed in the Middle Ages.